Lock your windows, lock your doors, and enter the alternate nightmare. In the fall of 1995, I was driving home from work on a 2-lane country road, on TV documentaries, moving like a cross between a trot and a gallop across open spaces. Just as I was about to pass it, it whipped around and looked at me. The eyes were orange, glowing in the headlights, and there was a long snout with sharp teeth. I slammed on the brakes and skidded to a stop. The creature disappeared into the ditch on the other side of the road. I sat there for a few minutes, my heart pounding, before starting up the car and driving home. I told anyone about it until now. Even with my military training, I don't feel like I was prepared to see something like that. I've been kicking myself for not getting a picture or even slowing down long enough to get a good look. This isn't something I can tell people about because they won't believe me. Can you blame them? It's not something I want to believe in either, but my eyes didn't lie. About 2 weeks later, and about 20 miles away from the first incident, I was driving home around 11:30 p.m. when my headlights suddenly illuminated a prominent figure standing in the middle of the road. It had been raining most of that day, and the road was wet, but there were no other cars around. This time I stopped about 100 feet from the tall creature that was standing in my headlights. It seemed to be staring at me and didn't move or make a sound. After sitting there for a few minutes, it simply turned and walked down the embankment on the side of the road and disappeared into the darkness. Again, I was utterly unnerved by the experience, and again I didn't tell anyone. I don't know what it was that I saw, but it wasn't anything natural. I was more shocked that I saw 2 separate entities on this same road, only 20 miles away from my first encounter. Maybe something is going on out here in the middle of nowhere. It's hard to say for sure, but what I can tell you, something is most certainly happening. I was born in San Francisco, California. I lived in the Bay Area until 1969, when my father bought a house in Castle Rock, Colorado. My father was an infantry soldier in World War II, and he retired from the military to work for Lockheed Martin at their Waterton Canyon facility. My grandmother came to live with us to help take care of us while our parents were at work. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my father worked the swing shift. I remember that the valley where I lived was an ancient Indian burial ground. When I was a kid, we lived in a medium-sized house in Castle Rock, Colorado. I am now 52 years old, and I have never told anyone of my experience until recently. At the time, it frightened me so much that I had trouble sharing this with my girlfriends. My grandmother told me not to talk about it and scolded me for acting foolishly. She also said we didn't see anything. I was having a sleepover. At about 3 a.m., I woke up and saw a human-sized figure, all white and glowing, walking by me as if it wasn't walking but gliding as if on ice skates. It stopped for a moment and turned as if to watch me, then continued hiking into my bedroom door, which was closed. I screamed, and all my friends woke up. We all saw it walking into my room. Then it disappeared. In the same bedroom, there was a small dressing table with a mirror. I had been sitting at that dressing table earlier in the evening putting on makeup when suddenly the light went out, and no amount of coaxing or fiddling with the light switch would bring it back. This happened several times in the past, so we just turned off the light and went to bed. Now, I believe that the figure that came into my room was the spirit of one of the ancient Indians from long ago. I was too scared to get out of bed, but the next thing I knew, it disappeared. It seemed like no more than a minute or 2 went by. After that, only the girls saw the figure making its way through our bedroom door into my room. One of my friend's parents came to pick them up, and one girl begged her parents to take her home. The next day, my grandmother told me not to talk about it and that we didn't see anything. To this day, I have never spoken to anyone about what happened until recently. This is the first time I have ever written about it. This took place in Colorado in a place called Spring Canyon. I went out coon hunting with my friends. I'm not one to believe in the unknown, but this changed my views on some things. Myself and 3 of my friends had piled into a ranger-type vehicle with our hounds. We were hunting for raccoons that night. With us was my dad's dog, who was placed closest to the truck's passenger door. My dad's dog is a blue tick hound and is significant for his breed. He's a running hound, meaning that he runs his prey down instead of cornering it to run it out. He has excellent stamina and is very strong for his size. I've taken him coon hunting many times and have never seen him quit on me once. My dad's been hunting his whole life. He's never seen anything he couldn't kill with a gun. He's a Vietnam vet and has killed more than his fair share of men. He's also an extremely religious man and is convinced that there is no way that the creature he saw was of this earth. As we were driving down this backcountry road, all of a sudden, the dog jumped out of the truck and took off into the woods. We all jump out to get him, and as we're running towards where he went, we hear this other noise in the woods. It sounded like something was running at us, but way faster than any man or animal could run. My friend got camera shy and turned towards the truck when he heard it coming towards us. We all ran for our lives to get inside that truck. As we were getting inside, my dad caught this glimpse of what he saw. It was standing at the edge of the woods, watching us run away. He said it looked like a gorilla but had longer arms and smaller eyes glowing in the headlights. My dad has always been skeptical about this stuff, but after what he saw, which was less than 100 yards from us, he's now fully convinced that there are things out there that aren't of this earth. But, of course, we always joke with him about it because the dude is well known for his drinking and smoking back in our hometown. So you can imagine how much ribbing we get out of him when the old hunting stories come out. So, we're riding back towards my dad's house, and we start talking about what we saw. I've always been skeptical of this kind of thing, but I am now a true believer. We all had witnessed something that was beyond our power to explain away through any logical means. The only problem was, if anyone who didn't see it with their own eyes found out about it, they would think we were all crazy. My friend's dad starts singing a gospel song at the top of his lungs as we're driving. My friend in the backseat begins punching him in the arm and says, "Shut up. You're going to get us killed." We had to go back later on and retrieve our dog, wandering around there. I was walking my dog in a wooded area near my house. It was early evening and starting to get dark. The noise it made sounded like a cross between a gorilla and a hyena. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I began to run. I thought for sure it was going to catch me, but then it stopped following me and went back into the woods. I was so scared that I didn't go back to get it. I have had several sightings of something large and hairy, usually between 6 o'clock in the evening and 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Once at home, there were loud howls outside our house around midnight which woke us up. We checked outside and saw no one but heard loud footfalls in the nearby woods. A couple of weeks later, we were awoken by howling around 3 a.m. and several hours later, my husband and I saw a large dark shape moving behind some trees in our side yard. I have seen it twice in person up close. Once I was at a park with my dog and 2 friends when we witnessed this creature walk across the street right next to us, no more than 20 feet away. At first, we thought it was a man because of the way it walked. Then we could see its enormous gait and long arms, which swung like a monkey would, only very fast and powerful looking. It also made loud grunting noises as it moved through the brush quickly. I am a woodsman. I'm a resident of the area near Farragut Park here in Washington, D.C. I've been living here my entire life without any problems from the so-called local wildlife, right? Well, my family and friends all live nearby. We work together as a community and create a habitat for ourselves in this urban environment. Whether it be nature areas to encourage the insects and the schools to enjoy, or clean parks for family picnics and other outdoor activities. We may not be world-renowned conservationists, or have endless amounts of cash, but we have done our best up until recently. You see, the wildlife has been thankful, or at least that's what I like to believe. We even had somebody come down from the local college to take a look at one of the butterflies spotted in this nature area. Apparently, it was a rather rare species. But now, not even the insects want to be around. You see, as much as I want to believe in the whole circle of life and that all animals should be treated kindly and with respect, there is one being that I would do anything to get rid of. Now, before I say anything, I want to know that I do have a small background in cryptozoology. I'm familiar with things like skinwalkers, Mothman, Bigfoot, you name it, so I know all about the Dogman, which is exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm here to tell you, they're very real. Listen, I know it probably sounds kind of nutty to even put those words together, but a dog and a man shouldn't be possible, right? I mean, we're talking about werewolf-looking beings here. But just all the stories. I mean, there are far too many witnesses here to deny it. Not that anybody would come forward. I mean, who would, of course. At first, we didn't know what was out there. Just that something was causing a real mess in the parks overnight. I mean, there are all sorts of critters that can do that sort of thing. Raccoons can dig out your trash. Bears can cause all manner of damage, and there have been numerous coyote sightings. What soon became apparent was whatever was entering the parklands, and was large and intelligent, as it seemed to be really good at avoiding any detection. Well, a couple of us even decided to do some nighttime patrols, just drive-bys of the area and such. Whenever we were about, whatever it was out there seemed to know and stayed away. Then it moved on to the yards and gardens of some of the residents. I'll never forget the look on my neighbor's face when he knocked on my door and said he had something to show me. I wasn't sure whether he'd caught something completely different on camera, maybe a peeping Tom or one of his kids sneaking out. But it was not the expression of somebody who discovered it being a naughty feral cat, causing all sorts of trouble. We sat down to watch the footage, and I realized why he looked so shocked. Now, this is in Fort Knox here, so the surveillance equipment and cameras we use aren't exactly the best quality. Just what we can afford to help deter would be burglars and such. The picture was kind of grainy and even jumped around a bit like an old VHS tape from back in the day. But although the creature he caught sneaking into his yard was shadowy, it would not have stood the test in a court of law. We could very clearly see the large shape, size, and stature of a man. At first, I thought that this was and that we needed to take it down to the station house. What I saw had caused so much anxiety. Well, the man turned to look directly at the camera, and it had the face of a wolf. Even in that grainy flickering feed, you can make out distinct facial features of a German Shepherd. That face I know really well as I had with lying by my feet as I watched the tape. This dog, or whatever you call it, with the main space, seemed to realize it was being recorded and ran off, leaping over a 6-foot fence like it was nothing. It would be easy to write off as some sort of prank, albeit that it must have been one hell of an expensive costume and mask. I mean, we're talking about a $1,000 costume easily. I mean, it looks like a man's muscular body, covered in tougher, perfectly proportioned. However, over the next few weeks, there had been several more reports from neighbors and people in the town about sightings, and whether their yards were just if they happened to be driving about. Whilst the Dogman, as we came to call, it didn't seem to be causing any more harm than any other critter. There was one extremely important factor. Other animals, even insects in the lake, seemed to be very afraid. And all of a sudden, there were way fewer birds flying around, fewer butterflies, fewer insects, less chatter from animals. It seemed like the wildlife took the hint, and they knew that this was some sort of abomination that was to be feared. We've yet to work out where it lives or comes from. Searches and groups in the woods around us has done this nothing. But as I said, I believe this cryptid is very clever. It knows how to cover its tracks. I'm not usually one for hunting something down. But whatever this thing is, it's scaring off every other animal. Either that, or we are dealing with an extremely intelligent predator. These things work hard to make themselves concealed. It's evident this creature does belong here. And if we truly are dealing with an alpha predator, God help us all. I, Jack Faulkner, my pseudo-name, have seen what I can describe as werewolves. Now, I know you might write me off just from that sense alone. And I can't verify that they are indeed werewolves. You know, shapeshifters under the full moon, but the beings that I saw. I have no other way to describe them based on their physical appearance. See, I live in a town known as the Hillside and had this encounter only last year. I was out with my girlfriend, Caitlin, at a little local bar. This is where we usually hang out on the weekends in Pennsylvania. We stayed there for about an hour or so, just having drinks and talking to our buddies before finally heading home. It's important to note that whilst both Kate and I had had a couple of beers, we were by no means drunk. And what we saw sobered us both up super fast anyway. It was dark and late, and we hadn't even gotten to the bar until near closing. But Keats always enjoyed the scenic road. She likes taking it there and home past us forest. It's really cool because buying this forest, there's an old church that she lives out there. Apparently, sometimes it's even lit up at night. It's not used anymore, and no one knows who would bother to go in there and light the lanterns. But I guess it's somewhat of a tradition that every so often, maybe once a month, we just take a drive out there and see. So far, we've never been on the right day. Well, I reckon I should probably go and do more digging to find out who actually goes out there and lights these lanterns. I mean, it's probably the owner or something. Maybe it's a warning. Who knows? Anyway, we were driving down towards the track that leads to the church, and I suddenly noticed that whilst I can barely see where I'm going, even with the headlights on, it is much brighter, which I commented on to Kate, and she points up at the sky. I think at that point, and I even made some silly joke, and the noise like a wolf. We both laughed. If only we'd known. The moon, of course, was full, again, just bleeding into this whole werewolf cliché. Which again, I'm not saying people who shapeshift into wolves are real. I'm just saying that the beings that we saw, I don't know how else to describe it. So here we are getting closer to the little church when Kate begins squealing, and we see that the lights are, in fact, on. It's not just a tall tale or local legend. I mean, we've been out here maybe 10 times since we heard about it. Never seen them on. I guess we'd never just been here in a full moon before. Maybe it's a monthly thing. I don't know. Kate was all for jumping straight out of the car. But I had this weird, almost ritual that I had to turn the car around and be in a position to drive away before I could park and get out. That little obsession of mine would save our lives. I mean, she's giddy and excited at finally seeing the lights, and I finally parked and having maneuvered the vehicle for a quick getaway, something my dad always instilled in me to have grown up in the Bronx. Always. That's something that stuck with me. Now, she's about to throw open the door when something instinctively made me put my hand on her arm until it awaited. She's about ready to kill me by then chomping at the bit to get out and look closer at the church. When we both heard a noise, everything about the sound just made my blood run cold. It was the slow, deep ground coming from somewhere close by, and part of me wanted to put my foot on the gas and just book it out of there, out of the sheer front. But as we all know, it doesn't work that way. You know, when characters make dumb decisions in movies, and you're always like, I wouldn't have done that. Well, until you're in a similar position, you don't get a clue as to what you would do. And right then, despite hearing a sound, which can only mean bad things, we didn't move. Instead, we watched as 3 large, and I mean Dwayne Johnson, the Rock-type large, just add more muscles, figures emerged behind the trees behind the building. Do you remember that feeling you get as a kid when you managed to convince yourself that there was something under the bed or in your closet? That very real fear in the pit of your stomach that you likely don't experience as an adult, unless maybe you're a parent. That was how I felt right then seeing these figures. Only I wasn't just a little kid who could hide under my covers and call for my mother, just in case I was having some sort of psychotic break. I looked over at Kate, whispered really low, "You see them too?" She didn't even need to answer. She just looked at me with a single tear roll down her cheek. Now, my girlfriend is one of the strongest women I know, and a real hardcore horror movie fan. I have never seen her so terrified. I mean, this girl is scared of nothing. And these things move closer. You might be wondering, how am I even able to describe what I saw so well? I mean, it was nighttime, and this only happened for a moment. But remember, the building was lit up, and it was a really bright full moon out. Plus, I still had the engine running and the lights on. As I said, they were this Dwayne Johnson size and height and build lay bigger, completely covered in the dark. For I'm not gonna lie to you, they looked exactly like what you'd expect out of a Hollywood horror movie that featured werewolves. How did I know that? Well, from the fact that they looked like wolves standing upright like men. I mean, they looked mean and massive. Then one of them stood and started growling, enough that it could grip your soul and terrify you. Suppose I hadn't been turned around so that I could stamp on the gas and speed out of there. I don't think I'd be writing this for you to share. If I had to try and turn the car around before we could race back down the track, then they would have ripped off the doors and had us for dinner. I'm sure as it was, can't turn back into a receipt to watch. See if they followed us as I attempted a fast and furious type escape on the road. They were all just crouched by the building, watching, like they did not want us around. Maybe somehow, I think they were tied to that building and couldn't leave. I mean, who knows what the actual rules are for these things? Until that moment, I thought they were something you only saw in the movies. Thankfully, I was able to get us home without crashing the car. I intend to try and do some research into that old and not-so-bad church. Find out just who lights those lanterns, what they make new about these things. I'll be sure as hell to be looking around at everybody else. And there might be other signs. The one thing I knew about these Dogmen is that maybe they are people. Maybe they once were people. I don't know how this whole thing works. I don't know. Maybe they're from the same pack. So far, I haven't been able to find out much. So you seem to be an expert in the subject. Maybe you know more about these things. Maybe you know more about that if they live in packs and whatnot, or how that works. Maybe these are really werewolves. I don't know.